Welcome to URL Unzip, Reboot, and Leave, a podcast about the psychology that moves us. Through real conversations with thinkers, doers, and seekers, we explore how we adapt, evolve, and find meaning. So let's unzip, reboot, and leave. Welcome to another exciting episode of Unzip, Reboot, and Leave URL podcast. Today we have someone who is a well-being warrior. She mentioned herself not disabled by lived experience, rather empowered. Deputy Chair Mental Health International Collaborative. But the main thing is she is now Mental Health Commissioner of South Australia. Taimi Allan. How are you, Taimi?
I'm really great. The weather has been up and down in Adelaide this week, but I'm feeling great. Yeah, had a
Okay,
nice
thank you.
rest over the holiday break.
Great. And thank you for your time in your busy schedule. Thank you.
My pleasure.
So today we will talk about psychology of mental health leadership because you are in that space and you are predominantly working from a lived experience perspective. I went through depression and so I am a lived experience as well, and how we can make things better for the world, for the system, for Australia, that predominantly we will talk. So in this lived experience, I will go to mental health little later. It is
Mm,
because this lived experience can bring a lot of wisdom into the system. How leadership is seeing this lived experience not only in mental health but across all
mm,
sectors. Because in mental health also there are IT, there is operation, there is procurement, there is everything, right? So
yes.
how leadership is seeing lived experience to integrate it more into the corporate world.
I think within that you've probably got a couple of questions, Gotham. Um, Firstly, your question, how does leadership see lived experience as separate to lived experience leadership? So there's two there. One is, I think, in some parts of the world, lived experience leadership is, and it's something I'd like to get to in South Australia, is seen as incredibly valued and valuable within every single profession. And what I see is a movement with other professions outside mental health proclaiming in their job descriptions and in their interviews and their recruitment process that if you have lived experience of surviving significant challenge and thriving because of it or despite it, then that is the kind of resilience we want in our workforce. And I think that this is a wonderful way of valuing lived experience. So whether you're an IT professional or a business leader or a CEO or working in clinical spaces in health, not just as a specialist lived experience professional, then acknowledging that surviving the challenges that you have as being a specific, I guess, qualification for doing a better role as an empathetic leader. And that's a movement I'd like to see more of across the world. Yeah. Yeah. And I guess, and the second part of that question that I took from what you were talking about is how are we creating spaces for dedicated lived experience leadership positions? And certainly some parts of the world are doing that very well. Scotland, Canada, some parts of the UK, some states in the United States, Australia and New Zealand are growing their lived experience leadership professions and certainly growing the steps that you can take as a lived experience leader, from peer support worker to, say, mental health commissioner. And those are important too, so that people, when they're entering a career, because the meaning and purpose was that they went through something hard and they'd like to help others go through that as well, then we need a progression so that people don't stay at one level but can climb within that career as well. So yeah, there's two things there.
Right. So that means like there is a shift definitely happening, and it is kind of growing as you
Yes.
as you speak. Okay.
Yeah. And some parts of the world are definitely kind of further along that journey than others.
Right. Right. Okay. So at least the thought process is already into the within the leadership umbrella. Okay, that's good.
Yes.
So as I was telling you that I'm trying to solve that, like when someone or their loved one is breaking down or going through a low point, there is no clear or optimal pathway what to do, basically anywhere in the world. So some places are a bit ahead, some places are a bit, but in
Yeah.
typically immigrant world, it's very convoluted. And so you are actually working and worked significantly in the intersection of technology and mental health.
Mm.
How we can make it faster with this AI,
Yes.
digital tool, human connection, like how you are seeing it next 5 years, we are drastically progress in this spectrum.
Yeah, well, I'm actively working on quite a few projects that are around the navigation of the mental health system. And I've created through AI a system that we use within my own office to navigate that system for others. We haven't made that public mostly because we still require with AI at this point an ethical standpoint and what we call human in the loop. So we will use the AI tool I've developed to look at what services exist, but then as mental health professionals, we have to go into those recommendations, make sure that those services exist, that they are high quality and ethical, that there's a way in, whether there's a referral part of that pathway before we give that advice to others. So I think in the next 5 years, we will see AI enabled tools become more ethical, more responsible, more evidence based. We will see a wider range of tools. I mean, I have what I call the 5 or 6 E's, which keep me on the rudder and knowing that we are on the right path. And that is, uh, does it help everyone? Is it available everywhere? Is it ethical? Does it have enduring impact? And can't remember what the sixth E is, but it's about accessibility and availability and making sure that everyone has what they need where they need it. And digital tools in particular enable that at a far greater scale than just employing professionals in the area. Both of those are needed, but at different levels, people may want to do some of the journey themselves, some of the journey with the support of their clan, their culture, their kin, their family, their friends, their workplaces, and sometimes they will want to go to a professional help. So being able to open all of those options to people, I think, is really important and something that technology can help with. At the same time, though, we have to navigate the inherent and obvious dangers of that technology, and that's something we're actively trying to negotiate with as the tech companies own that data. That's something we have to move away from and into people owning their own data and choosing who they gift that data to at what times. Yeah.
Because
But
yeah, with
I
that,
see great potential. Yeah, great potential.
like when I was working in Northern Adelaide before, I was talking to a few other departments also in Victoria and in New South Wales. Within the department also, they don't talk to each other, right?
No. Yeah, there are a lot of silos. It's not just mental health though. That's kind of
No, that's like in
any industry, but you're
healthcare.
right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so within the mental health, we tried to create a like a small product so that they can talk
Mm,
to each other, but it's not across anybody anyway. And
mm,
especially the Asian community, because I am coming from there. We are coming from a collective society where there is, a lot of shame, lot of guilt, and the
mm,
major. When I went through depression 2012-13, there was no cultural angle as such. I found uh,
mm,
within the document and the talk and all these things. Those things are coming into
mm.
the care system.
Yeah.
How you see this culture coming into the care system more? Because why I'm saying it, we Asians will not go to the professional straight away. That's the
Yes.
major barrier, and it's all psychological.
Yes, yes. I think that it needs to start with a better public narrative across many cultures. So at the moment, we still have quite a lot of um, perceived prejudice, discrimination, self stigma around seeking help because we have experiences that when we do seek help or we tell people about those experiences, we can we can face discrimination, and we can face prejudice. So there are several angles we need to attack that in. First, we need to look at the legislation that can protect us when we do reach out for help, so that we are not fearful of our jobs, our relationships, or anything like that, and we can get the help that we need. Secondly, I think we have to work within cultures and across cultures to normalise the fact that life is hard. And everybody will go through hard times. Some people will go through harder times than others, but going through those harder times, when you look at the context of the experiences that you're facing, or, for yourself, you mentioned that you went through depression. I can guarantee that if you and I sat down and we talked about that experience, there is absolute really good reason for you having gone through that. Through what you did and not had depression would have been abnormal. So we need to have these conversations that going through hard stuff is normal, experiencing lived experience and mental health problems and distress because of these moments is very, very normal. And the ways we seek help are individual as well as collective. So if what feels right for you is going to a few trusted friends or family members, then that should be the right path for you. If you can give permission for one or two trusted people to say, look, if I get to this point, I'm happy for you to help me get professional help, right? These are the sorts of conversations we need to have. And I think they start really, really early. So, and what I mean early is they start with our children. They start with our elders. They start with family conversations around the dinner table. They start with things that already connect us. So if you think of culture in particular, most cultures connect over food. Yeah, we get together and for celebrations, we connect over food. We look each other in the eyes. We celebrate what we're eating and what that brings to the table. But interestingly, I see our mental health conversations as food for the soul. So they go naturally together. If we're having a dinner conversation, then naturally it's a little bit easier to be vulnerable and open about the stuff that's harder, because you're also celebrating through food, if that makes sense. You're also making those connections. So for me, I think that's a really easy way in. And certainly there's been some really amazing projects, even here in Adelaide, particularly with men and cultural groups. So the African Men's Group has created get-togethers around board games and barbecues, right? So these are the ways those men connect anyway, but intentionally they're having conversations around, hey, how are things going right now? What's tough for you? Even part of normalizing it is not making it clinical. I say to people all the time, if you were sitting down with another human, regardless of what your position is, whether you're clinical or not, if you were sitting down with another human and you took your work hat off or your fear hat off or your need to fix it, you would inherently know what to do. You would inherently know what to say. If we take the fear out of those conversations and just go, oh my gosh, that sounds really tough. I have no idea what to say or do, but I'm here with you, I'm beside you, and we'll work it out together. That's mostly what humans need, regardless of the acuity of that moment. It's about someone to trust, someone to connect with, and someone that you know is going to sit with you through this pain. Most people don't need the person that they're talking to or they trust to fix it immediately. They just need a sounding board. They need some validation that what they're going through is real and is expected and normal. And then the next step happens, which may or may not be professional help. So I think from a cultural perspective, yeah, there are many cultures that I love working with that don't even use or like the word mental. So we talk more about well-being or social and emotional health or connection. And I think using the language that feels right for you and your culture is an important part of being able to normalize and have these conversations.
Right, very right. And one thing I also say within my community is, or I saw, if we are speaking who went through the same pain, then the cultural barrier gone down dramatically.
Completely.
So, and as you said, like you have to take off the hat of this ego and fear and all these things, then definitely we can listen, we can, yeah, very right.
Yeah, and look, and just knowing that, the statistics of, 1 in 5 people globally now will go through a significant mental health or addiction experience in this calendar year. That feels like a 1 in 5. There's going to be 4 people around me that don't get it, but you got to remember that that's just in this year alone. But
Mm.
80 to 90% of people will go through something like that within their lifetime. So you can look around the room, and the people around that room, no matter who that is, may not be going through something now, but they may have had experience of going through it before, which is even more valuable from that peer-to-peer experience. So if you're brave enough to raise that things are getting tricky, you'll probably find most people will say, hey, I get it. If not for me, then I helped someone else really close to me through that within 1 degree of separation.
Right. As you mentioned that that within the within the mental health sector, they don't talk to each other, the different departments. And recently, I was going through an article in the Conversation. It says that institutions push the value of scholarship that crosses disciplines, but academia pushes interdisciplinary researches out. you know
Interesting. Yeah.
so again, so first of all, they are not talking to each other, and the multidisciplinary researches are not happening also, and government system is like with diplomacy and disruptive. So how leaders can balance this?
That's a really good point, and it crosses over many things. Yeah. So we, it's really interesting, isn't it? Because in academia, you need to specialize. In the clinical space, generally you specialize. In health, you specialize, et cetera, et cetera. There's specializations. But when you look, I like to go back to the human body as an example of a complex system, right? And in my experience, I had, an endocrinologist that specialized in my hormonal health, and a gynecologist that, helped my women's health, and and an ologist for every one of the particular issues I was dealing with. But systemically, the issue that I was dealing with underlined every single one of the things I was going through, whether it be arthritis or thyroid or something, was inflammation. But you don't have an inflammologist that looks at your entire system and says, look, if we just calm down this part of the systemic response, then all of those other things will go away. So I think you're right in terms of specialities. We for many years, from back to Descartes, we call the Cartesian divide, which is that the brain and the body don't speak to each other. Psychology and mental health must deal with the brain, and psychiatry must deal with the brain, and the rest of the health profession will deal with the body. We now know, understand, probably always did underneath, that actually those two are connected inherently. And if your body is sick, your brain is sick. If your brain is sick, your body will be sick, and you'll have mental health issues as a part of that kind of whole system response. So I think we have to be better at understanding all complex systems to need to have that crossover. My job is to make some of those connections systemically, make sure housing is talking to health, is talking to child protection, is talking to First Nations wisdom, is talking to lived experience, is making sure that those connections are all speaking to each other. That's kind of part of my role. But I think we all have a part to play in pushing back on those boundaries that say you must specialize, because
Mm.
across the world, again, there's a movement to decentralize or despecialize even healthcare things. So you have kind of functional medical specialists now, which is a fairly new and emerging profession, which makes sure that we are not just specializing, but looking at whole system responses. And I think whether it be a human system or a complex government system, we also need to think about how do we make connections, not silos.
Mm, mm.
Mm.
And Helen Milroy, I think she actually put together a model where the First Nations they see well-being from five different angles,
Yes,
and
the social and emotional well-being model. Yes. Yeah.
exactly. And in India, where the culture is very old and very ancient, they also talk about all these things, and so this holistic
Yeah, so I mean,
living
you
approach.
think of Ayurvedic medicine, right? That is looking at the complex systems and how they interplay. If you look at ancient Chinese herbal wisdom, that is
Same.
not looking at one part of the body; it's the whole part of the body. All indigenous models, from the Chinese tree model to Whare Tapawhara in New Zealand, are looking at how does your brain, your body, your connection to culture, your connection to land, your connection to spirituality,
Mm,
how do all of those things interplay to create a sense of health and well-being?
mm.
And I think um, Western culture and Western medicine is on the back foot of that because they have gone that kind of Cartesian divide.
Yeah, so, totally understood it. Okay, so could a digital mental health leadership evolve into something like community-powered intelligence? Because this, lived experience worldwide, people are connected in real time, guiding the policies and the care. Because all we are talking about here, the non-clinical intervention, like
Mhm.
intervene as fast as possible so that they don't need to go to the professionals at the end of the day. So how you see this community powered intelligence is growing in coming years?
Yeah, look, it's a lot, and it's the fundamental basis of any digital technology that's going to work. So if we start with digital technology and go back to the core, which is community, when digital technology solutions fail, it's because you are alone at home on an app and you do it for a couple of hours maybe and then you get bored and for people developing those technologies, their KPIs are usually, can we keep people on the platform? Can we keep them using it? Will they come back? And ultimately, when they don't, it's because they have completely forgotten the need to connect people with other experiences like them. And so some people are really leading in that space. I think Sane Australia, their online forums are a spectacular version of good practice. So you can get the help you need, the support you need, amongst other peers that have gone through it, and you can choose to engage as much or as little as you want. But the uptake and the stickability of that is very high because you ultimately are connecting with other people that get it as part of that journey. And from clinical tools point of view, there's been a lot of tests that I've been part of, which is the difference between, for example, a CBT app where you're working alone versus a CBT app where you're working with your clinician or your provider or your support person versus a CBT app that does all of that plus connects you with other people that are also doing that course. And obviously, the more connections you make, the more highly that therapy is utilized, taken on board, has efficacy. Uh, yeah, so that's from a digital technology point of view. And certainly when I talk to developers that are creating these things, my first question is to them, um, have you got your end users involved in developing this? Do the people with lived experience that you are providing this for, are they part of your governance? Are they part of your design? Are they leading that process? Because if they're not, it won't be adopted. And that's
Mm,
really important. But I think that goes back to that conversation we had right at the beginning, in that technology is a really great tool, but it can't be and isn't the be all and end all. That connection to your community, however you define that, is the most important tool for your mental health. And as isolation and loneliness climbs across the world as a significant mental health concern, we need to be quite intentional in doing that. Here at the Commission, we're developing the Tall Trees project for South Australia, and that came from something developed in New Zealand several years ago, which was about growing lived experience leadership outside the mental health sector. So identifying people out there in all communities and all cultures that have gone through something or walked next to someone that's gone through something quite hard and can see a change that needs to be made. So it might be that you work in an industry and you want recruitment to change because of that lived experience, or you want to turn your story into a book or a play or something like that. So this training helps people create social change. It helps people connect with others that have similar experience. It gives them a mentor to be able to identify the change project they want to make and then help them to do that. And I think the most unique difference with talk as opposed to, say, champions programs or ambassador programs is that if you want to stay anonymous, if you're not ready to tell the world that you have lived experience, you can absolutely do that and still create the change you need to see in your culture or your community because of that. So we're going to roll that out over the next 6 months or so in co-designing so that it works within our South Australian context and works within all cultures that are in South Australia. And then it'll be pretty much gifted to the community to be able to take and tweak and change based on the cultural norms and languages that you use, and then roll that out, and hopefully that snowballs into a movement across South Australia and Australia where people can create change and normalise those conversations.
Wow, nice. So as you are seeing things from a very top, what are the top three concerning things you are seeing in the society in mental health, which you would like to give heads up?
Sure. I think probably I'd start with, and we've touched on it already, public narrative, which is fueled sometimes, not always, but sometimes by negative media. And that concerns me a lot. So when major incidences happen or tragedies happen, what tends to happen too much and unfairly in people's minds is that connection between violence and mental health issues. And it's less than 1%, that connection. And so the fact that we keep making those connections concerns me greatly, particularly in a world we have now where we're more divisive, more quick to anger. We feel like there's a lot more of us and them. I think we need to work really hard and intentionally in breaking down those myths around the connection between violence and mental health. It's simply not true, and the fact that the public and the media keep making those connections is a huge concern of mine. I think, secondly, the lack of holistic options that we have in our system and the dominance of the biomedical model and understanding in terms of not just of what we provide. So, hospitals and beds and psychiatrists and psychologists and things like that. I mean, those things need to be provided, but that they are provided to the expense of kind of more natural, holistic or systemic ways of looking at the whole person. That concerns me also, because most people don't get well from a pill or a psychiatry appointment. Most people get well because they are putting a lot of things in place in their life, either as well as or separately too. And what we fail to understand when we do that is that it takes 1,000 pieces each of us that we have to fill to make ourselves well. And if you think of your own experiences, Gautam, and you would know that there are a lot of things that you need to do to get through those moments of depression for you. It wasn't just, I took a pill and then I got better. Yeah. So I think our system needs to be better at providing that range of holistic options for people so people can pick and choose what are the 1,000 pieces that work for me. And I think the third piece, once again, we've touched on, is the navigation of the system and what's right for you right now, and how do we navigate that? Because we have an influx of people thinking that I'm unwell, my loved one's unwell, so therefore I must go to the emergency department. And we know that that is inherently the wrong pace for most people that are in distress. The bright lights, the physical pain, and that you hear, the triaging of, someone having a heart attack over someone having a panic attack. Those are necessary things within an emergency department, but make you feel like your experiences aren't validated if you're going in there with an experience of distress. So providing alternative pathways and making sure people know that they exist for people to go when they're in crisis or unwell is something that we need to do better at, and something that concerns me right now. Yeah, so those are my top three.
Excellent. So, on that, we should end our podcast here. Thank you, Taimi. Thank you for your time and wisdom.
My absolute pleasure. And thank you very much for inviting me along. It's been great.
Thank you.